Ralph, joined alongside Johnny McGonigal. Johnny, it's a Thursday. You know what that means. The Penn Live Blue White Breakdown fans know what that means by this point. We are live. We are on YouTube. Come check us out. If you're joining us early on here, drop us some questions and comments because, in all honesty, Penn State news little slow right now. So we're looking for some questions. We're looking for stuff to talk about, Johnny. But it's also a good thing. 4th of July weekend. I know you're excited. I feel like you tend to kind of go all out every year for the 4th. So at least since I've known you. So I hope you're enjoying this weekend. And looks like we've maybe got some decent weather as well.
It looks like we got some great weather, Max. I'm very much looking forward to it. It helps, when family like you have, connections to Sea Isle City, New Jersey. So come down here every 4th of July weekend, and always ends up being a blast. So very much looking forward to it. But and hope the same for you. Hope the same for everyone out there that they're able to, enjoy the weekend with family, friends, etc. Always a good time. We know Bob is going to enjoy it. He's on PTO right now.
Right. Right.
So it's you and I. We recorded on Tuesday.
Mhm.
We got this live pod today. So again, emphasis like drop your questions, comments, etc., and we'll get to them today. And then we'll be back Monday, right?
Yeah.
For another pod. And there might be some Penn State recruiting news to talk about from over the weekend. On Monday, we'll preview that a little bit today. But then also, I don't know, Max, a couple of few Penn State stars were in the news this week for some early preseason All American
Yeah.
nods. We're getting into that season of the college football off season.
We are. The National Football Foundation of America, I think that's what it is, the NFFA, releases like every summer. They give their little schedule of preseason watch lists and awards, and those are coming like at the end of this month, and that's hectic. But it's never too early to get some preseason All America recognition in. The Walter Camp Foundation, which is one of the bigger All American selections each year. It's an important one. They've got 3 Nittany Lions on there. Good place for us to start today. It's Nick Singleton on the first team alongside Notre Dame's Jeremiah Love at running back. It's Zane Durant on the first team at defensive tackle, and then it's Vanga Ioane at offensive line on the second team. And Johnny, I think that they're deserving picks, but my gut reaction, I'm a little surprised that Zane got a first team nod. I think he deserves it, but I'm a little surprised, especially considering he was snubbed from some high All Big Ten honors last fall. So it looks like maybe the hype is building a little bit more for a guy like Zane. What's your knee jerk reaction to that?
My knee jerk reaction is that people nationally are finally starting to pay attention to one of the best defensive linemen in college football. Zane Durant was incredibly explosive, dynamic, disruptive.
Hmm.
Insert your adjective here for a high level defensive tackle who gets after the quarterback and blows things up. That was Zane Durant last year. And James Franklin, in his weekly press conferences, it felt like every other week, and at some points back to back, sometimes twice in the same press conference, would always say that the one guy that's not getting enough national love, enough publicity, enough recognition is Zane Durant. And he was, you could look at it one way and say he was the beneficiary on the interior, of Abdul Carter and Denai Dennis Sutton coming off the edge. But I would argue too that those guys benefited from Zane Durant's pressure up the middle. And so justifiable that he's up there already as a preseason All-American.
Hmm.
Obviously has to make good on it. All these guys do in this upcoming 2025 season. We're sitting here talking about this in July, but he is incredibly talented. He could have went to the NFL after last season, decided to come back to Penn State. And you look at that defensive tackle room, they lose a lot of leaders, Devon J. Thomas, Hakeem Beamon moved on because Izzard. So, I mean, Zane Durant was already a really important player at D tackle and for this defensive line last year. But especially with those departures, he is the guy in that room.
Yeah, absolutely. Johnny, I do think Nick Singleton, not really a surprise. Probably a top 2 running back in the country if all goes well this year, especially with how much he can improve with some new eyes on him, like Stan Drayton. Vanga Ioane, I think you and I are both of the opinion that that guy deserves some love as well. And you wrote a very good story with some insight from Phil Troutwine about how that guy could end up being a first rounder this year. Really good prospect, really good player. The one that doesn't really make sense, where is denied Dennis Sutton? I mean, like, I understand, and honestly, I have been of this opinion for a while. I like what Deni Dennis Sutton can do, but the production, the numbers don't jump off the page until you look at the playoff run from last year. He was a little banged up in the regular season. Even if you go back to his sophomore year, the numbers were not gaudy by any means. There was some growth to be made. But if you watch what he did when the lights were on against Notre Dame, especially when Abdul Carter was playing very well, but was playing a little bit hindered. Deni Dennis Sutton is absolutely one of the best defensive ends in the country. Definitely has the potential to be one of the best defensive ends in the country. Has all of the tools. So I don't really understand how he doesn't at least get a second team nod here. I mean, he's the anchor of this defensive line, and if you just put on the tape from the biggest game of the year, the dude was on another level.
He was. I mean, he's really freaking good. Like really freaking good. We know that. Like I do think it was the injury that, messed with his production numbers, the stats and everything last year, him missing some time, taking a little bit to get back into the rhythm of things. The CFP run that he had, especially the performance against Notre Dame, I think will be a launching pad for him, going into this season. Like, I mean, I look at him as a first round pick. Like, I think a lot of people look at him as a first round pick, at least projected right now, again, sitting here in July.
Mhm.
But we just know that he's a really talented player. I will say, like, there are a lot of other good defensive ends in the country. There are a lot of other good players overall, in the country. I mean, for Nick Singleton, Zane Durant, and Venga Ioane to land on that team, like, that's impressive for those guys. That's cool for those guys. You look at defensive end. I mean, Mikal Kamara from Indiana. You've got Colin Simmons from Texas, David Bailey from Texas Tech, TJ Parker at Clemson. I'm missing one or two guys who are really up there. Dylan Stewart from South Carolina. Like, there are a lot of really good defensive ends in the country across college football. So, um, I'm not necessarily stunned that he wasn't a preseason All American on Walter Camp. He'll be a preseason All American somewhere. Walter Camp, I think, is one of 5 officially used NCAA All American like outlets. Like, there's a lot of outlets, ESPN and, like, Pro Football Focus, CBS, like a lot of outlets will put out their All America teams. And, I think there's 5 designated ones.
Yeah.
For the NCAA record books. Not the preseason All American stuff goes in the record books. It's really just end of season stuff. But I think Deni has a really good chance of getting there, even though he's not recognized right now.
So I want to follow up on those names that you did mention across the country. The ones who were selected: Mikhail Kamara, T.J. Parker. Those were the second teamers, and
Correct.
then Dylan Stewart and Colin Simmons were the first teamers. Maybe you could argue they've had a little more production to this point in their careers, especially a guy like Dylan Stewart. But Deni is like, I think Deni will be up there by the end of the season. So Johnny, now I have to put you on the spot a
Yeah.
little bit in honor of Bob not being here. This is now my job. It is my quest. Which other players could be or will be All Americans for Penn State by the end of the 2025 season?
The first name that popped to my mind was AJ Harris. And I think the only reason why he wouldn't is if he emerges as the Joey Porter lockdown, don't even look, in the
Right,
direction of
right.
that side of the field. And so he might not rack up, PBUs and interceptions if teams are just deciding not to throw at him. But at the same time, smart football people also recognize that. I think AJ Harris, has a real chance of ending, Penn State's program long drought of never having a first round defensive back go in the NFL draft.
Yeah.
I think he has a real chance of that. The talent is obviously there. Him coming over from Georgia and transferring in prior to last season, acclimating himself so quickly, emerging so quickly as a guy that needed to be a starter, and he proved why all throughout last year. Like,
Mhm.
I just think he is due for an even bigger jump this year. And he was the first name that popped in my mind. But there's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys on this team. I mean, Zaki Wheatley is in there if he's as productive as he was, especially down the stretch in the
Yeah.
CFP and in that Notre Dame game. I mean, a sleeper would be maybe Trevor Pena, like if he really pops off
Yeah.
and becomes the number one and over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, that kind of thing. Because a lot of times, and I think we've both voted for All American teams before. We voted for these awards before. Like,
Mm.
a narrative is kind of a part of it sometimes too. And everyone across the country knows that Penn State wide receivers have not been the best over the last few
Right.
years. And he's the guy who kind of is able to elevate that group. He'll get a lot of publicity for that. So Trevor Pena is another one that I would throw in there as a possibility.
I think on the same frame of reference there, Johnny, it would not be inconceivable for Drew Aller to really easily launch himself into All-American conversation
Yeah.
if those receivers perform, you know?
I
Like,
was looking for under the radar with
I
Pena.
know, I know.
I left you Aller. Like that one's,
Yeah,
but
it was
like it
easy.
really makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just you mentioned the wide receivers in the narrative, and I figured it was prudent to say Drew Aller is right alongside him. If this passing game takes off, it might be difficult to leave him off of the All America conversation. But that one is a little more obvious. If I'm going to pick one that's a little more under the radar, I think that there's a few places you could go with this. I like the AJ Harris pick. I think that is one that you've been on him for quite a while, dating back to last fall. Very good player. Zaki Wheatley, of course, good player. I like to stay on the offensive side of the ball here. I could very easily see a guy like Drew Shelton finding his way onto the All American list because he is extremely underappreciated for what he's done in his Penn State career. I mean, this is a guy who we go back to it. He started 5 games as a freshman in place of a guy who ended up being the number 11 overall pick in the NFL draft. Played the bulk of a Big Ten schedule and had no hiccups. And it's really been that way for his entire career. It's like he gets in there and he doesn't do anything wrong, so nobody talks about him. But that's kind of the key. Like I don't have the numbers in front of me of how many sacks he's given up, how many pressures he's given up, by PFF standards. But Drew Shelton is just Mr. Reliable on the left side of the line. He started every game for the past 2 seasons, and there's really only room for him to keep getting better. His footwork has always been fantastic at the offensive tackle position, and I think that he's a guy that definitely does not get enough love in the grand scheme of things. And my super, my super under the radar mega sleeper pick, Luke Reynolds. You're not getting many sophomores on the All America list, but if it's not a Tyler Warren situation where he's the only passing threat in the offense this year, he's going to get more production in that way, in my opinion, because defenses will have to spread out and guard these wide receivers as well, which they didn't have to do with Warren last year. Now, Tyler Warren, generational talent who it did not matter. You could put 3 guys on him and he was still going to catch the ball. Luke Reynolds could turn into that guy. He might not be that yet. But if he's taking one-on-one the coverage more often than not, the guy is going to be an animal. It might be tough for him to make his way onto the All-American list this year, but I think before the end of his career, he's going to be in that situation.
One more guy to name, and I don't want this to be like, hey, we're naming the entire too deep here.
Right.
There has to be some picking and choosing, but one name that kind of popped up for me, I had said AJ Harris, but I'm looking more in the middle of the defense, and
Mhm.
Tony Rojas, I think
Yeah.
really could have a massive year because last year people forget, like, last year was his first year as a starting
Mhm.
linebacker. It was his second year in the program, first year as a starter, and you could tell that there were times where he was moving 100 miles, or, his mind was moving faster than his body was, or sometimes his body was moving faster than his mind was. Like he was over anxious, sometimes a little too eager to make a big play, a splash play, and caught himself out of position a little, yeah, at times. And then obviously he dealt with an injury too.
Mhm.
Towards the back half of the season, he was playing hurt
Yep.
and required surgery in the offseason, which he's going to be cleared and all good to go. For these summer workouts, and then with training camp upcoming. I think without Kobe King now at linebacker, Tony Rojas entering his second season, like talking to Dan Connor, Penn State's linebackers coach now, just about Tony's athleticism, what he brings to the table. You know, Dan is the program's all-time leading tackler. He played with Paul Posluszny, he played with Sean Lee, and he said that the quality, the trait that they share, those three share with with Rojas, or at least Rojas shares with them, is that they're the drive to be great every single day. The competitiveness is there. And if you pair that with a guy who's a little bit more experienced and a guy who has the athleticism that he has, the former high school, blue chip running back as well
Right.
as a linebacker.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw it in the SMU game, that pick six. Like
Yep.
he can make those splash plays, but if he's able to kind of bear down and be, a better just down in, down out kind of player, I mean, that could easily lead to, some All American or even first team All Big Ten kind of recognition for him.
Yeah, I think the takeaway from this specific conversation, Johnny, is that Penn State should be peppering the all Big Ten first and second teams this year. And it's just a matter of how many of those guys can kind of break through the ceiling
Yeah.
to be All Americans. And I really think that, like, if you're going to give me an over under, I'd maybe set it at like, I don't know, maybe 2.5. How many programs really end up getting 3 All Americans every year? But I'd probably take the over if you set it at 2.5.
I
I
would
think
too.
that's I think that's a difficult thing to do is get 3 All Americans on the list, but I really think it's doable for Penn State this year. Obviously, preseason is what it is, but there are just there are enough players on this roster that you can say are in the top 5 to top 10 of their position, even heading into the year. And depending on how they play, it can really affect things. All right. Want to say, if you're tracking with us live here on YouTube, please drop us a question and comment. How many All Americans do you think Penn State is going to have next year? If you want to know something about the roster, you want our opinion, let us know. Always happy to answer some questions here on the Blue White Breakdown Live. Johnny, in the meantime, let's preview this weekend a little bit of some recruiting. We did already kind of talk about it on Tuesday's podcast. If you've already listened to that one, we'll try not to double back too much here. But the 4th of July and 4th of July weekend, whenever it comes around, is without fail every summer a huge recruiting weekend. And in the past 2 to 3 years, it's been a really, really big one for Penn State specifically. Last year, LeVar Arrington II, Man Arrington, committed on July 4th. It is escaping my mind who committed on July 4th of 2023, but I know back in 2022 had a lot of guys. I believe Zane Durant was one of them. And yeah, obviously that worked out pretty well. There's great reviews about LeVar Arrington. The second, this is going to be the 4th of July is always a big day, but it kind of seems, Johnny, that this year we might have to wait until Saturday.
It always seems that I'm on a boat on 4th of July weekend
Yeah.
when these commits roll in. And fortunately, looking ahead to this weekend, I've done a couple pre-writes, Max.
Yes,
We're
sir.
getting ahead of things. We're putting that in the system and just being able to hit send for whenever they happen, because we do think that that's the case with a couple of guys, or at
Mhm.
least possibilities. Dorian Barney looks like he's going to be going probably to Michigan.
Mhm.
The corner from Georgia, originally from Pennsylvania, blue chip corner, 4-star. Penn State heavily in on him. But two guys who look like realistic July 5th on Saturday commitments for Penn State would be Marlon Bright, the 4-star offensive lineman from DePaul Catholic in New Jersey, as well as Tyson Harley, the 4-star defensive end from Gonzaga Prep in DC. Same program as Carter Meadows, the 5-star defensive end who committed already to Michigan. Penn State was in on him. Same program, though, that produced Olu Fashanu as well.
Mhm.
And that worked out well for Penn State, taking a 4-star guy with some tools from Gonzaga. So if Tyson and Marlon, if they both commit to Penn State, which looking at On3 and some of the other recruiting services as well, like it's looking like that will probably be the case.
Yeah.
You never know. But if that's the case, it'll further bolster a really good recruiting class that Penn State has been able to put together.
Yeah, absolutely. And Barney's an interesting one, Johnny. If he does end up choosing Michigan here, that really feels like a guy that Penn State's going to keep pushing for through the end of this cycle. I think
Yep.
that we did kind of lay out on Tuesday where this class still can go through the end of this recruiting cycle. There's not a lot more spaces. Obviously, if they can flip some of those top guys that have gone elsewhere, they'd probably like to do that. But there really is kind of a narrowed focus heading through July and really into the rest of the fall. But corner and defensive back seems like a position, especially when you think about the Joey O'Briens, the Kari Adams of the world. Corner and safety feel like a position where Penn State really, really still wants to lock down one more guy and make that be a guy that is like high level. And Dorian Barney fits that bill. Kari Adams, Joey O'Brien, they all fit that bill because they have a really good toolsy group of corners and safeties committed right now. I mean, there's also, I think, one of the guys in this class who maybe gets overlooked a lot just because he's been committed for a long time is Matt Sieg. That's a really good football player who's coming from in the state and going to play some safety at Penn State. I think he gets overlooked a little bit. They have good players committed in the defensive secondary, but I still feel like corner, especially, is one where they'd love to get a late flip or still get a big name off the board, just to kind of round out this class. And I think Barney, because like you said, he's an Erie native despite playing in Georgia these days. I think he's a really good player. I think there are others out there, but Barney is maybe in the frame of where Kari Adams is really like top 10 kind of guy. Even if Barney's like top 15, it might be more realistic for Penn State to circle back to that one. We'll see where it goes. Things can change. But that's a guy who, even if he goes elsewhere, I really think Penn State will stay on him until the end.
We'll see. We'll see what Saturday brings. I know I'll be on a boat on Sunday, and I will not be on a boat on Saturday. So I will be. My computer will be near for whenever Tyson Harley and Marlon Bright and those guys whenever they make their decisions. Some recruiting news upcoming for Penn State this weekend.
Mhm.
Max, one more thing I wanted to touch on because we talked about the guys who are already preseason All-Americans with Walter Camp, guys who could be. No deny Dennis Sutton on that list.
Mhm.
While you wrote that story that came out earlier this week, I was writing, kind of a similar deal in terms of like projecting players and all that kind of stuff. It's the EA Sports College Football
Sure.
26 rankings. The player ratings for the top 100 players in the game came out earlier this week, and Penn State was well represented.
Yep.
Penn State was well represented. They had 6 guys in the top 100, including. Do you know all 6 off the top of your head? I'm going to test you here.
So I did not look at the list myself, but maybe I can
Okay,
try.
then this is perfect. Go ahead and try and guess.
Yeah. Well, I know Drew and Nick Singleton are probably the 2 highest, I assume. Um,
Nick is the highest Penn State player. Nick
mhm.
Singleton, 93 overall. He's the 10th highest rated offensive player in the game, and
Yep.
he's tied for the second highest rated running back
Okay.
behind Notre Dame's Jeremiah Love as a
Yep.
95 overall. And
Yep.
then it's Singleton, Washington's Jonah Coleman, Louisville's Isaac Brown,
Mm.
all at 93 overall.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I did see that one. I saw that one. I also saw, by the way, EA's graphic had Nick Singleton listed as a Louisville player, which obviously is not true.
Oh,
But
yeah, unless something happened there. I don't know. We'll have to ask Nick if he transferred to Louisville in the last couple of days.
I hope not. I just did a big interview with him like last
Yeah,
week.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I
Listeners, if you
know.
haven't checked that out, by the way, do that. Check that
Yeah,
out.
yeah. It's
Yeah, it was
podcast
good
form
stuff.
and a couple of stories online. So Drew, I know, is in there. Let me guess. Zane Durant is probably one of the top. He's not in the top 6.
Nope.
Wow. Okay, AJ Harris has got to be one.
Yep.
Denai's got to be one.
Yep.
So that's 4 of them. Probably Katron.
Yep.
Yep, that's number 5. And then, boy, who could that 5th or the 6th one be?
Who did we
Uh,
talk about as preseason All Americans?
is it? It's up on the offensive line.
Yeah, Venga.
It's Vanga.
Yep.
Interesting. Good for
Yeah.
Vanga. Good for Vanga. I mean, I'm a little surprised that's as far as like a video game goes, like I feel like there are some other guys that have like traits that could, do well in the CFB universe. Good for Vanga. It's interesting. I think that's mostly a fair list.
Yeah. Yeah, so Drew, so we've got Nick as a 93, and then Drew Aller, Katron Allen, Denai Dennis Sutton, Venga Ioane, all 92 overall. AJ Harris, 91 overall. So of the top 100 players in the game, Penn State has six.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm interested to see or to kind of pick your brain on. Do you feel like Drew is deserving of the 92? And I have my opinion, but so he is, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and tied as the top rated quarterback
Yeah.
with LSU's Garrett Nussmeier and Clemson's Cade Klubnik. Are all three of those guys are 92 overall. 91 overall is Lenora Sellers, Carson Beck, John Mateer, Sam Levitt from South Carolina, Miami, Oklahoma, and Arizona State. I think Drew got a bump there from last year's game,
Mhm.
but I think he deserves it. Especially you look at all the skill set that he has, the Army has, and everything. I'm sure he'll be fun to play with for Penn
Mhm.
State fans. But you think that's fair? He's right in the mix there.
I mean, I think kind of what I said, where like some of the guys have traits that
Yeah,
work well for a video game that maybe don't translate to actual on-field production, but could make them a higher overall. I think it makes sense. Like Drew arguably has the best physical traits of any quarterback in the country right now. So I think that makes sense. Well, when you compare him to the other guys that are up on that list, like Cade Klubnik hasn't really accomplished any more than Drew Aller in his time as a Clemson Tiger, and they came in the same class, and have been have been kind of compared to each other for a long time now. So I think it's. I mean, you could almost argue that Drew has done more than Klubnik to this point in his career. So I think that makes sense. Nussmeier, really good quarterback who's got some deserved buzz going on around his name. But again, LSU hasn't been that good the past couple years, so that is going to fall on a reflection of him for sure. Uh, I will say I'm a little surprised to not see Lenora Sellers among that top group, just because the dude is like a walking video game in real life. So like
I
I
mean
think
he's a 91 overall versus a 92.
I
Like,
guess that's fair. I guess that's fair. I just when it's the same thing with Madden when they talk about like the 99 club before the game comes out, like
mhm.
those 1 or 2 overalls before the game's actually released, it makes a difference, I feel like. It's a different tier, but no, I think it's fair for Drew. I absolutely think it's fair.
Yeah. I'll say this with Lenora Sellers. So I played a few games with South Carolina in the 2025 version of the game
Yeah,
when Sellers was like an 80 overall or 83 or something.
yeah,
And he still felt like Madden '05 Michael Vick,
yeah,
like just absolute cheat code.
yeah,
So him as a 91 overall, I think you're going to see a lot of neutral college football fans taking South Carolina to start their dynasty mode with because he is going to be a hell of a lot of fun to play with. But I'm
yeah.
excited for the game. It comes out. I think the early release is July 7th.
Mhm.
So that's what, next Monday, next Tuesday,
Yeah. I gotta
right?
get my pre-order in, Johnny.
Yeah, yeah, we need to get the pre-order in,
Yeah,
and then I think the post it like it open fully sale whatever is July 10th, and I'm not sure if that includes the deluxe version or if the pre-orders. I wonder only because Nick Singleton and James Franklin is on the deluxe
right.
edition cover for those Penn State fans who are interested in that. But I mean, Nick Singleton is probably going to be a hell of a lot of fun to play with in the game. I'm sure Katron Allen, the truck stick is going to be
Yeah,
used big time. I mean, Katron, deservingly so, a 92 overall, by the way. Like,
yeah, yeah.
he's
He's kinda overlooked so often, in these national running back conversations, and I still think, like and I think a lot of people on the Penn State beat at least feel this way. Like, Nick Singleton is the more pure, talented running back of the 2, but I also think that it's largely predicated on his physical traits. If Katron Allen had Nick Singleton's speed, he he'd be unreal. I think that you know they still have to play their senior years, but I think to this point in their careers, Katron has shown slightly better vision. Running through the offensive line and whatnot. And so, I think that I don't think it's particularly fair that Nick Singleton gets all the flowers, even though he deserves a lot of what he's getting. I just think Katron needs a little bit more as well.
It would have been cool to see Nick and Katron next to each other
Yeah,
on the EA Sports cover.
yeah,
I mean, because Katron has done just as much as Nick has,
yeah,
and that's saying a lot. Like both
yeah,
those guys have
yeah,
been awesome.
yeah. It's
And
not a knock on anyone.
no, and of all the running backs, by the way, and I think there were 10 or 11, 12 running backs in the top 100 players ranked on EA Sports 26. Only one team had two backs,
Yep.
and it's Penn State with Katron and Nick. Um, so yeah, I'm interested. You said you saw we were talking off camera or before hitting record that there was one Penn State player, a transfer
Oh
that
yeah.
had some eye popping speed.
Yeah, yes, sir. Well, a transfer is the proper way to describe him, but he's now in his second stint at Penn State. Of course, we're talking about the safety King Mack, who, by the way, at Penn State is ecstatic to have back in the room. Talked to Anthony Poindexter a little bit a month ago, and King Mack is a very welcome face in Happy Valley. But yeah, he has 98 speed in the game, which is among the top 10 players in the game, and I do remember from when Mac was in at Penn State for his freshman season that he was, talked about, discussed among the fastest players on the team. But with that said, when there's guys like Nick Singleton or a guy who we've talked about a lot over the past few years in pure speed, Elliot Washington, I'm a little surprised to see his name jumped up there among the top 10 players fastest in the game. Maybe he must have he must have improved on the burners a little bit down in Tuscaloosa.
Curious to see when all the player ratings come out, what Tony Rojas's speed is,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that kid can run, like
yeah. Should
run,
be
run.
tops in like linebackers across the nation.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm interested to see when I don't think the full player rankings are out yet. I mean, if they're not out yet as we record this on Thursday afternoon, surely they'll be out sometime in the next couple days or
Yeah, they'll
and
probably
you know
drop today as soon as we get off of the podcast.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. But we know that the game comes out next week. I know we're excited and a lot of other, college football fans, Penn State fans are excited as well.
Yeah.
But Max, I think that's a good place to wrap. Is there anything else that you wanted to chat about?
No, I think we hit on it. I mean, for a Thursday podcast where we started it by saying we didn't have much to talk about, we still banged out 33 minutes. So I think we did well. Folks, we see Penn State getting 3 All-Americans in 2025 if all goes well. Let us know if you feel the same way. YouTube comments, make sure you like, subscribe, follow us on wherever you get your podcasts if you're listening or and not watching. We appreciate you if you tuned in live. We appreciate you if you're watching after it's been already recorded. And yeah, we'll see you next Monday. This has been the Blue White Breakdown. Take care.